I will now read the University of Iowa Acknowledgement of Land and Sovereignty. The University of Iowa is located on the homelands
of the Ojibwe,
Welcome to the Stanley Museum of Art's lecture by Ian Barry. We're excited to partner with the School of Art and Art History Painting Department to bring Ian to campus. I'm Catherine Reuter, Academic Outreach Coordinator at the Stanley Museum and Special Collections in the main library. Tonight's event is being live streamed on Zoom. If you are joining us on Zoom, you can turn on closed captioning by clicking on the closed captioning button at the bottom of your window or clicking on View Subtitles. Throughout the program, you can comment using the chat feature and put your questions for Josh into the Q&A box. Josh in the back right there. We'll have time for questions from those joining here in person and virtually at the end of the presentation. Ian Barry is Dayton Director of the Tang Teaching Museum. Hired in 2000 as the museum's inaugural curator, he became director in 2012. He is a leader in the field of college and university museums and is a regular speaker on interdisciplinary and inventive curatorial practice and teaching in museums. His publications have garnered numerous awards, including 8 prizes from the American Association of Museums. During Barry's tenure, the Tang's collection has expanded greatly with significant additions in historical photography and contemporary art. Barry serves on the board of the Museum Association of New York and on several advisory committees, including Cranbrook Academy National Advisory Committee, Artist Advisory Board of the Fabric Workshop and Museum, and Saratoga Springs Art Commission. Additionally, he has organized over 100 museum exhibitions. Recent projects have featured Sarah Kane, Elspeth Kelly's postcard collages, Chicago Imagist sculptural work and dimensional painting, and a career survey of Donna Nelson's paintings. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really thrilled to be here. It's a return visit. I've been fortunate enough to be invited a few times to visit with grad students here, and I love every visit. It's especially exciting to see studios. And thank you, Laurel, for being a great connection and inviting me, and seeing you every summer at Yaddo is a real treat. I'm from Saratoga Springs, New York, and I live right down the road from Yaddo, which is a fantastic artist retreat, which some of you have been to in this room. And also really good to see Terry here. Thank you for coming. Terry also is a regional friend, and it's nice to have some Skidmore alums in the room too, who both have fantastic shows up on campus right now. Which you should go see, including the one on the first floor of this building, which is a real knockout. And hello, from a distance, and thank you to Lauren Lessing, who's the director of the Stanley. She's a great leader and will be, I think, a wonderful, wonderful person here and really make important things happen in your new museum, which I got to look at today. It is very, very impressive. And I'm excited for all of you and for everyone in this community for this great new museum. Definitely being in the presence of new things being made is a rare privilege. And I'm grateful for the students who've invited me in to look at their works this week. I'll see a few more tomorrow. The studio is the site of my own entry into the art world. First as a young maker myself in college and as an artist assistant a little bit later, and then as a presenter of exhibitions and as a museum professional, and now also as a teacher. The studio has remained a constant locus of action and catalyst in my life. So I appreciate the welcome into yours. I think we are in a moment of modernism. Art history in particular goes through a cycle of modernisms, moments defined by a break with the past, moments that recognize and critique the present while looking to forge a new future. Some of our greatest manifestos and most influential artworks are born from these historical breaks. I believe we're in one now. The tumultuous world events of our past few years insist that we review and recalibrate, restart, revision. It's not an option to maintain or go back to a previous way of thinking. This makes for an exciting time to be engaged with art and ideas, and a really potent time for you to be opening a new museum. In the best moments, it feels like we're all making something new together. We'll miss the mark, make mistake, and fail in our attempts at the new. We convened a wonderful faculty symposium just a week ago at Skidmore on this very topic of mistakes. Mistakes are necessary for growth, and it is critical that we all cultivate and embrace the experimental and the vulnerable. A key part of our job as makers, practitioners, teachers, and most importantly, all of us as supporters and audience members, is to act with generosity, curiosity, attention, and love. I'm just back from a week in London. I've described that to a few of you. And I've been thinking about some of the ways the museums there were facing the future. And I found a quote from the director of the Tate. See if this works. From Maria Balshaw, Tate's director, and presenting a lecture at Cambridge this year. She framed the museum as a place for robust conversation, debate, and even controversy. She says, a museum can hold dissent and disagreement. In summarizing some of her thinking, she said that museums purport mainly to be about the past, but they are actually about the present, services for people now, and the future, the archive. What do we save? How do we present? What do we recall and put into our communities? I love this idea, and when I think about what you might be thinking about here on campus about opening a museum, I kind of want to explore with you tonight, like, what is the Stanley Museum going to be about? I'm going to now present to you some images of things around the Tang Museum, which is the museum I'm the director at Skidmore College. Show you a little bit about the way we answer some of these questions and enact some of these services for people now. And in particular, then finish by showing you some of the website to show you some of the things, how we responded to this COVID moment, which I think goes to the future and the archive. which has become more and more important to us at the Tang Museum. But I want you to keep thinking about this idea of what is your Stanley Museum going to be about. And maybe we can chat about that in the Q&A a little bit. Because I've been having some great tours and conversations, and I think there's a lot of potential. So what is the Future Archive? What are the things we present and save? This is the Tang Museum. It's designed by Antoine Predock. It opened in October of 2000. It was the first museum for Skidmore College and the first art museum in Saratoga Springs, which actually is, for a small town, a place of many museums. But it was the first art museum and the place where most people in our region or in our local region go for contemporary art. We, I think, are known mostly as a place that shows contemporary art, new works by artists from all over the world, but mostly from a fairly close radius, because we like artists that stay in residence and come and go and meet our students and faculty. But even though we're mostly known as a contemporary museum, we do like to present things in contexts from all time periods. And our collection ranges from the ancient to the now. This is an exhibition of a show called A Very Liquid Heaven, which is an example of a kind of show that we do at least once or twice a year, where we're working with faculty co-curators to put things together in ways that directly support syllabus and classes. So this was a show about space and in particular variable stars. So that's work by Russell Crotty and V.S. Hellmans. This was a show about environment in Africa, environmental concerns in Africa, and work by Bright Eke, who came and made pieces on campus with material that he found at Skidmore. This is our MacArthur Award-winning Professor Heather Hurst, who is showing her research to some of our youngest museum goers. What we did was she was looking for a place to sort of review her research, and she researches wall paintings in Mexico, and you cannot see them. All of these spaces are archaeological sites and they're underground. So we built for her, per her dimensions, an actual size model so that she could see for the very first time how the drawings that she recreates by going underground and taking these, micro drawings and photographs could actually line up. And she could actually make new connections and new discoveries because of building this model. So how can the museum also be a site of research? This wasn't an exhibition. It was in a room, off the atrium, but it turned into a site where she could share her research with the public. We also show works that faculty are interested in teaching with that we might not own. So if someone's interested, we have a great Asian studies department, and there's a professor who wanted to teach with Tibetan work. And so we work with other museums to borrow collections and bring them in, things that we don't have in our collection. And I'm a big fan of collections sharing. And we're working on that right now, our first really big sort of collection sharing projects where we co-acquire work with other museums rather than each of us individually from city to city buying the same things over and over. We have to buy, each one has to have one. Maybe we could do a better job of sharing our collection. So that's something we can talk about maybe in the Q&A, but that's something that I'm thinking a lot about for the future. We also change our spaces dramatically. So this room is the same room one show later. This is a show of Chicago Imagist work. artists who live not too far from you. That piece in the front, you may not recognize as a Chicago work, but Red Grooms, who's best known as a New York artist, actually spent some of his most critical early time in Chicago. And that's the piece that he made called the Chicago Arch, which is in the Art Institute's collection. We also show surveys of artists that need to be better known in the art historical canon. And we pride ourselves on doing very rigorous, extensive, career-spanning surveys and catalogs that often travel with artists we feel like deserve more attention. So this is Terry Adkins, Nancy Grossman, Machine Project, Mark Allen, Elizabeth Streb, artists that we feel like are kind of at the forefront of really independent thinking and independent voices in history, but because of that may not have fit into the market very well, and therefore may not have made it into history in the way that we would hope. So what can we do? This came from our asking ourselves, what can we do as an academic museum? What can we do as a college museum that's different from our larger civic museum friends who are doing phenomenal work, but not always able to take a chance with an artist that might not sell tickets. It is interesting seeing this image in this moment of where we're sort of not quite back from COVID. You know, I wonder, like, I love packing the museum with people, and I was realizing, I was telling somebody today or yesterday, like, I was like, wow, all the slides I'm going to show are like jammed with people, you know, doing fun things together. And you know, I'm very hopeful that we will sort of return our museum to this kind of function soon. But this is how I love the museum, when we can really use our spaces actively and create new kinds of things. So Streb, for example, is a choreographer who lives in Brooklyn, and we invited her to come for a month, bring her dancers and bring her equipment, and basically use the gallery every day as a rehearsal space to create new work. And then she had several presentations, and this was one of the kind of final sort of public shows. It was super exciting. Inviting the public in is a really important part, I think, of making the museum an active space for any community. And whatever you define as your community, and it's worth defining. So one of the things you might decide here on your campus is how you're going to define who the audience is for the museum. Is it going to be faculty and students? Is it going to be students? Is it going to be faculty? Is it going to be the community? Which parts of the community? And it's, I would, for those of you who are decision makers in some way around the museum, I encourage you to not choose everybody as the answer. Choose some directions so that you can actually do pointed work. It's important for us to, we chose K through 12 school age kids as a key part of our audience. Many of the school districts around us didn't have very robust art programs, and we figured that was a really great service we could do. Plus, our Skidmore students could lead those tours, learn public speaking, lesson planning, all different kinds of things beyond even just the education students, but all students. And so we have become a site for families and community in the region. Curatorial experimentation and action and performance are all part of what I hope people understand or expect when they come to the museum. We are interested in action. We are interested in the museum feeling more like a studio or a laboratory, a place where not only new art is being shown or collections are being studied or new pedagogy is being created, but actual actions are happening in real time and the place feels alive. And this is Liz Collins' installation where she invited different people to work in and out of her installation. So this is a professor, Adam Tinkle, who is doing a sound series where students could come and explore sound. So they're actually using their bodies to transfer sounds back and forth. Again, like, man, COVID, these pictures look like ancient things. I hope we can touch each other again and go. Yeah, can we have concerts anymore? So curatorial experimentation, what does that look like? I'll show you a few pictures of some faves. This is a show from a few years ago called Affinity Atlas. Almost all works from the collection, pulling it out using Warburg's, Cabinet of Curiosities as a starting point for thinking about works in the collection and how they might be seen in new ways. You can see that painting on the bottom is Myron Stout and Nicole Cherubini and Paul Tech, Lenore Tawney, Phyllis Galembo, Hugh Locke, Navajo Rug, Charles Long. All things from the Tang's collection put in new proximity to each other to make something that we hope is new for every visitor, no matter how familiar they are with the artworks. Fred Wilson, some felt hat forms, Dorothy Daner, Willie Cole, all different things coming in and out of the collection. I love putting things into really interesting contexts and having that be a catalyst for our staff, our curators, our registrars, our educators to play with and for new things to happen. So this is a show called I Was a Double. The speakers hanging from the ceiling are all, we commissioned David Lang, who's a fantastic Pulitzer Prize winning composer, to make new piece of music for each artwork in the show. So there's a speaker above and we went to a recording studio and recorded it. And you could walk around and hear voices it was a vocal composition. But it also inspired us to have fantastic other musical performances. This is Ashley Bathgate, who's just a phenomenal cellist who happens to live in Saratoga, who performed several times in the museum, including in I Was a Double. This is another show dedicated to a collector. This was a show in honor of Claude Simard, who was the partner of Jack Shainman, started that gallery together, Canadian world traveler, curiosity seeker and collector. Phenomenal collection, and I wanted to do a show in honor of him. So all of the works in this show belonged to him at one time. And we acquired many works for the Tang's collection from this show because we share, I think, a kind of a worldview with Claude. And so the Asafo flags that are hanging from the ceiling are now part of the Tang's collection, as are some of the other works. How can the museum also be a place for speaking and speech? How can the museum be a town square? I was describing to a few about how some of the students who are on the advisory council to the museum this afternoon about this idea of sort of student organized speech, maybe that's dance, maybe that's a song, maybe that's a class or a moment of activism. This is an example of us turning our first floor gallery into a display. The flags are a piece by Nell Ziegler, where he collected a tattered American flag from each of the states over many years. So it is an artwork hanging from the ceiling, but it also provided us a way to build a stage for us to create election programming. This was during a season of a U.S. presidential election. And so every 4 years, we do a big blowout somewhere around the museum, which is a literal microphone for debates, dialogues, campaign issues, student feedback, performances that are in response to something that's going on in that moment, in that election with some candidate. And so we've now done this, I think, 4 or 5 times, and they're really, really important moments for the museum because it allows for many people to use the museum as a place to engage with things that many don't think the museum is interested in. You know, a lot of people aren't sure the museum is interested in them. And when we can open up almost like an open mic-like moment or leave our space open for different kinds of things to happen, more people understand that they're welcome in the museum. The museum becomes a more central part in their lives, becomes a more central part in our community. And we change as museum professionals. We learn things. People bring new things to us through these times, and the museum grows and changes with our activities. This is a zine making workshop. You can see the wall in the back is a display of some of our ephemera. This is all stuff from Stephen Lieber. We were looking at that box in special collections today. So Stephen Lieber was a great ephemera dealer in San Francisco, and we have a big part of his collection in our collection. So how can we build on collections and have actual responses in real time with the work very close together? How can we invite speech in all kinds of ways? We every year we have a radio station for one day. And it doesn't go very far. I think it makes it, you know, to the parking lot. But it is a place for a day of a lot of programming and a lot of people who are potentially new to the museum coming to have their radio show. And we certainly have a great radio station on campus that's a more proper radio station, but how can the museum be a site of quick things, nimble things? This is up for, you know, maybe 12 hours. And then, you know, we put it on the shelf and it's in a milk crate, and, you know, we bring it down and set it up, and then we're transmitting. And how can those things come and go and be really responsive to community desires for something that's in the air? So working with faculty, what does that look like, and what can we do to kind of aid and help the sort of the core of our community, which is the, you know, education of undergraduates. Skidmore is a 4-year undergraduate only liberal arts college, so we only have, you know, 2,700 students, and we can all be pretty tight community. So we can get together around an issue, and even a small group of, say, 15 or 20 students can really make a big impact on campus. And so these are some images of an exhibition that we put up about Israel and Palestine. And it was a show of photographers work who had all photographed pieces or photographed around the region. And you can imagine what a hot topic that is, particularly for some people in our community. It was a perfect catalyst for students to talk to each other, describe their own experiences and their own activism, their own feelings about the region. It allowed for professors, the man in the middle is a religion professor at Skidmore, Greg Spinner, who brought in this case, a gentleman from Tang. So how can we use local expertise, local responses outside of our faculty, outside of of the college borders to bring in and talk to students? How can those debates and dialogues be aided by looking at art first? How can that change? How does that change a maybe potentially tense conversation? And how does the museum then provide a space for debate and dialogue, which is so critical for getting through any of our learning moments? Because we do this, I think it makes the museum over time feel like a place where mistakes can happen in a way where somebody's trying something out, trying a new idea out. Maybe they're trying a new way of being. Maybe they're trying on a new way of acting, or a new name, or a new group of friends, or something they've just learned. How can that can be a scary moment to kind of come out with something. And the museum, at least on our campus, is a place for that. We also are just committed to this idea of dialogue as the way to sort through everything. And so this is an example of an interdisciplinary dialogue series that we do with faculty, where we bring in great artists, this is Laurie Anderson, to speak with faculty, often not from art or art history. So getting people to talk across knowledges and to talk in their own vocabularies about things that they're both interested in. And we found that the artists that participate in this, rather than standing up at a podium and giving their slideshow of their recent works, when they're in dialogue with somebody whose expertise is maybe very interesting to them, the artist is often asking the questions of the faculty member, and the conversation really goes back and forth. And this is Stephen Shore and our English professor, Terry Diggory. Willie Cole and a group of kids. Dialogues are not always between faculty. Josh Fott talking to some of our students in collections. So we use every little space of the museum. So sometimes these happen in very small private spaces. This is in collection storage. Sometimes we do that in offices or in the wood shop or in the coat room. Wherever it is can be a site for dialogue, for learning, for performance. That experience actually prompted a theater piece. This is a still from a theater production where the theater department asked if we could clear out storage so they could do a play in storage. And we thought, wow, that is going to be a project. And we went for it. So we moved all the crates and all the stuff out of two of our main storage areas, put them in another place. They created a series of kind of a moving theatrical experience throughout the museum into storage, and got viewers. Basically, it was a sneaky way to get everybody behind the scenes. And the students wrote different vignettes. This is them actually looking at a Creta Kent print. But using our crates and our storage stuff all as props for the play. Creta Kent is a really good example of collections. So collections are critical to this equation too. And we have a collection of about 17,000 objects. We have some pockets of really interesting growth that have happened recently. And I'll finish by showing you a few things online that are based on the collection. But Karita Kent is a really key part of our collection. We have over 400 works by her. She was a pop art printmaking nun from Los Angeles from the 60s to the 80s. She moved to Boston, and the end of her life, she was in Boston. She is one of the most innovative printmakers, I think, in all of printmaking history. And we often bring them out and invite faculty, students, artists, others to respond. And in those responses, which I'll show you a little bit later how we archive them, we become a really rigorous research institute. And so this is the artist Jeffrey Gibson, Bernardo Rios, who's a professor at Skidmore, and one of his students who are, sharing their own variations of their responses, whether it's to the message that's in those prints, or whether it's the process of how she made those prints, or the activism. And in each case, they are coming at it from a different point of view. We record all of these classes and visits as much as we can, so that we can transcribe them, videotape them, photograph them, and then disseminate them back through our website for other faculty to reuse as resources. For a few years, and we might make more of these, but I wanted to mention sort of the dissemination of all of this. How do you get this out beyond our museum's walls and even beyond our college? And so we published a journal for a few years, and we'll probably do more of this, called Accelerate, where we basically made a really snazzy magazine or journal about all the things our faculty was doing around, in this case, race and justice with our collection. So it was a focused 3 years of just focusing on those classes. It included, in this case, a student response to a work. So the self-help graphics poster was in our collection, and the work on the right is by a student who had a real great connection and did some research on self-help graphics, which is a great printmaking place in LA, East LA, and made his own response. Students interviewing artists, artists coming in and meeting with a wide variety of audiences. Students interviewing artists is something that we're really keen on. I teach a course called The Artist Interview every other year or so. And lately I've been doing it every year, where every week a different artist from our collection comes, and 2 students interview that artist. And we do it real sort of high-end recording with a video crew, and we make our own kind of Art 21 series. And the students are the ones that manage the interviews and sort of run the show. And so the course is about 20 students, and 2 students every week is sort of their turn. They're up at bat to interview whoever's coming. So this is students with Njideka Akunili Crosby, Michael Jew, that's his piece, the crane legs piece in the back. Tim Davis, that was a real challenging interview for the students because he brought his guitar and he was so fun, but the students, often this is maybe their first time interviewing somebody or even being in front of the camera. And, I think he wanted to ask them as many questions as they really needed to get to their questions. Jamal Cyrus. It creates Larry Pittman. It creates a really fantastic archive, and we all now understand our collection so much better from having these moments and these visits with the people that have made the things in our collection. when Larry came to, we have a really monumental painting of his in the collection. And when he came, we learned so much about the making of this work and all of the different symbolism. And then our faculty at the same time choreographed sort of a new dance response to that piece, which Larry was able to see, which is really exciting for him. So not only do we get something, but we're hopefully giving something back to the artists as well. The Accelerator journal, or the Accelerate journal, also was kind of tied to this group of panel discussions. We had a curator at large for 3 years to organize panel discussions on basically hot topics, urgent issues. We really wanted to double down on the idea of the museum as town square, and just brought together phenomenal thinkers, writers, artists, in conversation about, this was a conversation about cultural appropriation, and who defines the terms. And this panel, that's Renee Cox with the great silver boots there, who was fantastically provocative, and talking about her own work and how, really pushing everybody out of their comfort zone to really decide where they stood on the issue. And listening to these, in this case, these two younger scholars sort of talking about music and fashion, completely changed, I think, our community's language and attitude around some of those issues, which were making it kind of really tough in a lot of classrooms. And when we air those things, in a group, we can really get somewhere rather than just be stuck. And then, of course, Renee was able to sit and talk with students, which was great for those students interviewing her. Here we are. I want to just show you a couple of things on our site. This is how I'd like to finish, about like what have we done in this moment, this COVID moment? How did we respond? And some of a good chunk of it is now available on our website. So this is our website live. This is, and I encourage you to go to it. We've been adding a lot to it and spending a lot of time on it. We think of it as kind of as equal platform to our gallery program. So if you go to the website, you'll see all the different, where'd we go? Here we go. All the different exhibitions that we have up. We have a great show about fiber art and science, which is bringing in a lot of classes this semester. Outsider art show, project by Lauren Kelly, which is a 2-year exhibition, some sound pieces, some other shows coming up in the future. We also we do a lot of interviewing of what our students are up to. So there's a whole series of video interviews you can watch about students talking about what they do in the museum. And this is a great one, Maria Stack talking about her making an exhibition during or after and inspired by her experience of the summer of Black Lives Matter protests in Saratoga. So lots of archival stuff. But if you go to the collection and you hit the collection, you can search things in our collection. We will forever be trying to catch up with putting our collection online. It's not all there. Our collection is a lot bigger than what you're going to find online, but there's some of it there. But if you click on Explore Stories, we have been archiving a lot of the responses that I was telling you about here. So Gwen Darkangelis is a professor and this is a comic that's in our collection. And we basically commission small writings, short essays, creative responses, whatever it may be, to things in our collection. And these live on here and then can be used as readings for courses for even well beyond Skidmore. And so we now have a long, and in case of, in some cases it's, the artists themselves talking about their work.
Can you tell us a little bit about the concept behind it? It's part of a series of photographs that the figures with different kinds of props, generally referring to the civil rights movement and the period of Black militant liberation struggles in the late 60s and early 70s.
So these can be used in a variety of ways. We keep updating them. Some are text, some are, here's a lot of the different ones we made during COVID. We had a big mask making project. We worked with Isaac Scott, who was taking photographs of a lot of the bigger protests in Philadelphia, to archive and print his photographs. Suri Banks is a really interesting example of reaching out to administrators too, to write, not just faculty. So, Suri was our dean of students, rarely asked to speak personally about anything. Administrators are often they rarely get invited to do the fun stuff. So how could we, she wrote a really intense response to this, that was, a way for her to share something with the community that she doesn't get to necessarily in other places. So how can the museum be a site for all kinds of growth? So this is the growing archive of material. And some are videos, some are writing, some are museum curators. This is Rebecca McNamara is one of our associate curators. So this is really growing in a wonderful way. And I want to show you one more thing. So under education, we've also started a thing. There's lots more on the website. I hope you kind of take some time and explore. We have lots and lots and lots of material on the site, but art and ideas pages are something we started during COVID, where we create a theme, and usually that theme is based on something that is sort of regularly asked for, like a group of people that are coming to the museum often, or a department, or an idea that keeps getting asked for. So, isolation was something we were all dealing with. So as a museum staff, we looked at isolation and, thought about artworks in our collection that we thought might have something to do with that theme. And some of it were old exhibition views. This is Whiting Tennis. Archival material, And then we put some of those things together to create kind of a little course all to itself. Ideas for teaching from other professors who pulled things from the collection, exercises or projects, all based on things from the collection. Ideas from that you might think about if you want to see something. Student writings. We have a thing called the collective catalog that we do on social media where we invite students to write very short responses to things in the museum collection. And then a link back to our library, who was doing, of course, some really great work on all of these things, which was our nod to trying to connect collections across campus, which we really have only scratched the surface of. We haven't really done too much of it, but I think is a really great sort of move for us in the future. So, environment, portrait, sound, different courses. So here's the artist interview course. So you can, the artist interview during COVID was a lot of artists who were making work about that, and you can sort of basically follow along with the class from wherever you are, and get a little taste of what the students are learning. That's it. And I would love to hear from you. What questions do you have? What thoughts do you have? Yeah, Terry.
Well,
Yes, so our Zoom viewers can hear you actually speaking.
two. Got that. So, well, thank you for years of brilliant and exciting shows that are always taking on sort of new forms and, not even the shows, but the activities. And so you asked
Yes.
if we to talk about what the Stanley
Yeah.
might be for us in our community. And something that I would maybe like to hear you talk a little bit more about is sort of orchestrating those collaborations and how to, and how often, how long they take, and mainly sort of the relationship that happens over time, all the activities that spark the idea and how the idea evolves.
Yeah. Well, it happens in a lot of different ways. And I think one quick answer is it needs to happen in a really diverse amount of ways, because some people take a really long time, maybe 5 or 10 years before their idea is gested, ready, and they're ready to talk about it with us. Other people want to come have coffee every Tuesday with 10 new ideas. And I think as part of what we try to be as a museum staff is open to very different kinds of pitches and ideas and generation of ideas. And sometimes it's really quick. Somebody says, I'm doing this midterm exam on this, and we put something up a week later, and then it comes down 2 weeks after that. And so the whole project took 4 weeks of conversation. In other cases, we're talking to people over many years, and there's refining and proposals and budgets and loans and maybe publications and presentations that are really kind of very public and sort of big, and lots of people work on those. Lots of people in the museum, lots of people across campus, and so. Very importantly, I think I learned early on when we opened the Tang is to be as welcoming and open to different kinds of people, and faculty come up with ideas in different ways, and the museum staff needs to be generous and welcoming to all those different kinds of, some people would really like the museum to support them with some resources, whether it means artworks or pulling artworks for a class or a space to do something or funds to do something. Other people say it would be great if you did something on this. You guys go do it. Like, I don't really want to do it. And then other people really want to author something or co-author something, and they want to get together with people they don't know, and they want to, use the museum as sort of a way to sort of connect across campus. And I think we really strive to be open to all of that, and we create ways. We have a Mellon-funded faculty seminar that we teach every year, where we take a group of faculty to a different city in the US and kind of explore the sort of museum, culture of that city, and then workshop class ideas with that group for the semester after. And that becomes kind of the farm team for a lot of exhibition ideas and a lot of publication ideas. That's one way. But we're open to all different ways. So I guess the key is really being attentive to the community. As a museum staff, we read the course catalog. We look at who's newly hired in different departments. We try to get the books of people that they just published something. We go to people's lectures across campus and try to connect, like, oh, did you see we hired somebody who's really into, the geology of this region. I wonder if they have ever met this person in dance who's doing this thing, and how can we be a connector? And then maybe the Tang can be the presenter of whatever comes from that connection. Or maybe that connection is something that's very private and it's just for a class, or it's after hours and it's not for the public. It could be lots of different ways. And so timing, it takes all different kinds of time. I think we regularly have to remind faculty that, because it can seem daunting. And they see their colleagues work on a show for 2 years or write a long catalog essay that looks like a lot of work. And we have to remind people, man, it doesn't have to be that. It could be something you do in a class period. It could be something you do, just for you. One of those things I was showing you was an English professor who sometimes comes and does writing for her own writing, just looking at things in the collection, and writes essays for herself that she will hopefully publish. It can be all sorts of ways. Does that answer, Terry?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really about getting all the museum staff and everybody and all the supporters and all that, everything that makes the museum run, on the same page about being open and generous and welcoming to all the different ways people come to us. Yep.
Are there any Zoom questions? Chat.
Yeah, Laurel. Oh, you have to talk into the mic.
Thanks for humoring me.
2 mics.
So just sort of following on Terry's question, because definitely like the connector thing seems such a fantastic thing, especially in a large like university, and that, if you can be nimble and if you can be like the connective tissue between 2 programs, so say someone comes from engineering and they've met someone from dance and someone from art, and they're having a beer and they're like, hey, this would be really cool, in terms of like the activator thing. So they come and pitch. So what I'm assuming is like, it's almost like a newsroom, like the curators, the museum staff, they have ideas, they're pitching ideas.
Yeah.
Other people are pitching ideas.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's in combination, like I might come up to someone who's at the museum staff and say, what about this? So I guess, like, who's the decider? Like,
How
how
do
do
you decide?
well, I mean, not even deciding, because that's sort of like great idea, good idea. Everyone usually can
It's one of the
tell, you
pleasures
know?
of my job as
Yeah,
director.
yeah. And then do you like assign, like, okay, this is your portfolio,
Sometimes.
this is your,
Sometimes, you mean like within the museum staff?
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
sometimes.
yeah, like as the point person or,
Yeah, so we share being the point person for
Yeah.
projects, being the project manager.
yeah,
And, we're a small staff, so that means it's not just curators. So it could be, our designer for a while curated all of the sound things in our elevator.
right.
Because at that time he was really into that, so he had an outlet as a curator, even though he didn't have a curatorial role officially.
Yeah.
Or our registrar might be the point person on a project for a faculty member.
Or might like pirate radio and do some.
Yeah, I mean, it may be an education person. I think we are a small enough staff that we can break down our job descriptions a bit and be a little fuzzy on the edges. And everyone on the staff understands that we're all educators, no matter what. Even if you're, the building manager or the visitor service desk, or like, we're all educators. And we're all part of the presentation and the creation of whatever we're doing. And so I think it's a great way also for staff development, that not just the curators are the ones that are, making decisions or moving things around or giving tours. A lot of people step up and give tours or talk about the museum.
And probably is also like the funding for whatever project, obviously that could come in any shape or form. Like sometimes it's a partnership, sometimes sometimes maybe a proposal is made and then you have to find, like for Elizabeth Streb, in a performance world, I mean, did the Tang produce that?
Yeah.
And did you have to go out and get funding from, like, fundraise for it?
Sure. I mean, that's also the director's job.
Yeah.
And so, the museum is funded like most other museums with private individuals giving money and foundation grants and a lot of support from the college. So we're like a department of the college, just like the library or IT or the English department, or we're one division of the college. So our general budget comes through the academic wing affairs part of the college. And then we fundraise like other external museums, in all the ways one does, to augment that budget and be able to afford interesting projects. So, that faculty seminar described is funded by the Mellon Foundation. We have a great endowment for faculty projects from Mellon. So every year we start with a pot of money that can go for sort of faculty co-curated projects or publications. We work with, in Elizabeth Streb for example, we worked with special programs and dance department and other people on campus. And they were in residence, being funded in a couple different ways. So yeah, we work together on all of those things. And we try to make sure people get paid. So faculty get stipends for writing things. So all of those writing things people got paid to do that. People get a stipend when they curate a show, when they write an essay, when they, do a public dialogue with an artist. So there's different money for all of those things to happen. I don't think there's any sort of secret about that. It just kind of comes from all the places it comes from. We're writing grants and, meeting with supporters all the time. And don't really like auctions. We don't do that. We don't have a gala.
No bake
But we do
sales.
other things. We do other things. Yeah. Also, I think energy and success in whatever measure this is successful sort of attracts energy. And so when we're doing a lot of things, a lot of people in and out, there's a lot of excitement, things build and we get connected with people, and people like being part of things that are exciting and making new things. And so fundraising for the Tang is a really joyous thing for me. It's not a drag, it's a real, it's like we're sharing stories of what we're doing, and there's people that are interested in being part of that. And so we have a really good group of funders that routinely support the things we're doing. Yeah.
So firstly, thank you for this really great introduction into the Tang Museum and sharing with us some of your pedagogy and how you're implementing the museum into an educational practice. My question is about the considerations that are being made in through the curatorial staff and how work is adopted into the collection. And so I'm really wondering what kinds of work the curatorial staff is looking at and how they make those decisions. I've noticed that through the images, a lot of the work seems to be from really established artists, and at an educational level, that's really great because students are able to have direct access to really top tier artists, people who have really established practices. But going further into what you said to be the mission of the Tang Museum, that it's not only a museum for students, now it's a museum for the community. And so how is the consideration of really early or emerging artists happening with shows and with being adopted into the collection?
Sure. I think so we don't, we're an unusual museum in a sense that well, maybe this isn't that unusual. The vast majority, almost all of our acquisitions are by gift. So we're not out going to auctions and researching and finding that perfect thing that we've always been looking at and wanting. We're mostly opportunistic with collectors, and mostly collectors, but could be artists themselves who want to donate a piece to the collection. And we sort through each of those offers, proposals as a curatorial team and sort of discuss the merits of each object and whether, and one of the major things that we think about is whether it's going to be used in teaching. Can we imagine this fitting into courses? Can we imagine people being interested in this object? Maybe we're not going to make a show of this person's work, but do we think that it'll be of interest? And because we're an interdisciplinary museum about ideas, almost everything we could say yes to, everything could be an idea. But we try to be a little rigorous about what we accept and decline in that way. I think maybe you are seeing some big names partly because of who we invite in to sort of give talks and do that. But we have a lot of vernacular work, like of photography with hundreds and hundreds of unknown photographer works. And, we look out for very local artists every once in a while when we can acquire a piece or even commission a piece from somebody who's really hyper local, somebody who lives in Saratoga. But we don't have a lot of strategic rules around collecting. It's really about how things come to us, and they often come to us through our exhibitions, I will say. So if we do an exhibition with an artist, then maybe the Karita Kents, for example, we did a survey of Karita Kent's work, a catalog, it toured, and then an archive of Karitas was offered to us later, like, oh, you're a museum that's interested in that. Would you like a gift of Karita Kent prints? That started other people seeing it, and then we got another gift. And then now we have an archive of Karita Kent. Black Panther archive started the same way. You know, we had some photographs by Stephen Shames, and then we were able to acquire some Black Panther newspapers, and then that created like, oh, I see you have this and this, maybe you'd like some more photographs, and then we suddenly have a really nice archive. And I think we try as curators to be sensitive to the connections, and I would say like the two things I just mentioned are connected in terms of activism and sort of justice, which is a topic across a lot of departments at Skidmore that gets taught in different ways. And so it's also material that we can collect. You know, it's not expensive. A lot of it's ephemera or prints or multiples. So if we do want to buy something, maybe it's something we can afford. So we think about all those things when we're thinking about acquiring things. We rarely think about, is this a famous artwork? Or is this like a super well-known person and we should have one? But I think we never think about that. And we're lucky in that way. We're very fortunate that we have sort of the freedom to acquire work really based on the ideas and what we think how we could use it, as opposed to its market value or its kind of prestige. Because we don't have permanent collection galleries. The galleries are always changing. So, you know, the works are rarely on view. They're kind of pulled out for courses. They're in and out of group shows. They're used in storage. So we don't rely on somebody like, you know, we're there to come see the, you know, the great Van Gogh painting that's always there, or the great Jackson Pollock, you know, painting. You know, we don't put our collection up in that way. So the pressure for it to be famous in that way is not too great. But we do have some things that are kind of by big, you know, artists with big careers that have things in a lot of museums. It's a diverse collection. It's not particularly deep in any one way. It kind of has pockets of interesting, eccentric things. Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I think we can end our official portion of the evening at this point. So I'm going to turn off these mics. If you want to continue answering questions,
Great.
that'd be great.
Thanks, everybody.